they will even do our online program. They'll take our online program because they go, some people can't do it. Maybe like right now, a lot of people, there's men or women who are deployed in military. Their spouse to be is here, so they have to do it online, and they still accept that. So it's an interesting deal. But the question is, are you ready? You don't know if you're ready until you read premarital education or until you have conversations. I had premarital counseling. It wasn't great, but I had it, Kathy and I. On my wedding day, I am like going, this is nuts. I have made the biggest mistake in my life. Kathy was so excited. I didn't see her that day until the wedding, but she was so excited. And for me, I was staying at my uncle's house because her parents were at my parents' house, and they kind of drove me crazy, but that's another story. And I am sitting there going, how could I have gotten out of this? What have I done? And I'm not saying that's the norm. I'm just saying I really wasn't ready for this. I hadn't really done much thinking about it. I probably didn't do as much praying as I could. And, I'm glad I went through with it, but I didn't want to be the runaway groom, because that would have messed up the movie, The Runaway Bride. But anyway, are you ready? Here's a big question. This is a really important question that a lot of times people ignore. When it comes to are you ready, are you willing to listen to your relational community? A lot of times what will happen is the girl will fall in love with this guy. He's kind of a guy who's, she likes the bad guys, or she's turned into a person who wants to try to save this person from all of his stuff. So he's a porn addict and he drinks too much, but I'll get him married and then we'll change it and we'll get him to church. He doesn't really go to church that much. And so what happens is the relational community, you're not talking to your good friends about it. You're not talking to your mom or dad. You're not talking to people that you know. And so a lot of times the relational community, remember we were talking yesterday about like arranged marriages in India, that kind of a thing, right? Well, the relational community has a lot to say about it. So you'd better know what your relational community thinks about that guy, that woman, okay? My relational, kind of going back to me, because I make it sound like I have a lousy marriage. I don't have an incredible marriage, but we had to work at it to get there. The point is my relational community said, marry this woman right now. You're crazy. She's amazing. So I kept getting that, and yet I would see stuff that kind of bugged me about her. But the relational community, kind of held me up in a good way. That's not the reason you get married, because your relational community says no if your gut says yes, if your gut says no. But anyway, what is the relational community? Do not downplay, the relational community. Okay, are you ready? Are you willing to look honestly at red flags? So if there are red flags, I strongly say, and I do this in counseling, if there are red flags before the marriage, after the marriage, you got to work through the red flags. Work on the red flags, make it happen. It can happen, things can change. Remember that the Bible says where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. You go for it. You get the counsel. But when it comes to the red flags, here are some red flags. I'm not calling these yellow flags. I'm calling these red flags. So if any of these things that just popped up there are things that are going on in your relationship ahead of time, and again, nobody's perfect, but if there's addiction, then you got to work. Do not marry somebody who's an addict. That's just ridiculous. And don't think that your love is going to change them. You don't know. Addiction is really tough. So, have them work through the addiction first, or fine, seriously, don't jump in there. Again, you're just hearing my thing. Abuse. If this person is abusing you, if there's some kind of a domestic violence where, you were with I'm talking to you girls now, you're with some guy and he hit you, and you go, well, yeah, it was just a one-time thing. That's a red flag. Do not pass go. Don't collect $200. Stop. And either work on that process or say, we're going to take a break here, okay? Unfaithfulness. You go, yeah, but he only did it once. She only did it once. If they're being unfaithful in your relationship, then again, before, if it's after, you got to work through some of this, okay? But before, then that's a red flag, okay? And then cohabitation. Now again, I already talked to you yesterday about cohabitation, but if people choose to cohabitate, what did I say yesterday? Greater chance of divorce, a greater chance of adultery once if they got married. They cohabitated and they got married. Greater chance of divorce, greater chance of adultery, much greater. And also, one of the things I said was less sexual satisfaction. I think it's interesting. Here's what we're learning, and I'm giving this is secular input, this is not Christian input, because Christian input, they don't study this stuff as much. The secular input says this, that women move in with the guy because they see it as pre-marriage. Guys move in because it's more, well, for one thing, they get what they were hoping for in bed, but they also move in because they don't see it sometimes as pre-marriage. They'll talk the marriage thing, but what they see it is it's helping financially, and there's other things. Well, a lot of people today cohabitate because they go, well, if we move in together, then it's cheaper. And guys do that. I'm not saying all guys do that. I'm not saying all guys are jerks. I'm not saying all women do the other. But I'm just saying that's a red flag. Even sexual activity can be at least a yellow flag. Okay? If you're involved in sexually, it's back to my thing. I mean, you guys, one thing you'll remember from these last 2 days is that what I say is when you're involved in a sexual relationship, you now cannot discern if it's infatuation or love for 2 to 3 years. Remember I said that about Ray Short yesterday, okay? The guy from Wisconsin who studies that stuff. Pregnancy. Now, some people disagree with me. I totally understand. But if I don't personally, it's at least a yellow to red flag to get married just because you're pregnant. If you're not in love with that person and you had a slip up or whatever it might be, then for the child's sake, you really want to think through the process. Do I want to get married? And I'm talking to women and men on this because you had just as much guys to do with something like that too. And so again, that's somewhat of a red flag. And then we start talking about at least red or yellow. Poor communication and conflict skills. I'm going to talk about it here before we're done today. But poor communication and conflict skills. And also unresolved issue with a previous spouse or relationship. I was in a counseling appointment with these people. And they were second marriage people. And the woman, I always ask the question, first time I'm with them, if there's been in there's a previous relationship, I go, are all the issues with the previous ex or the previous boyfriend or girlfriend, do you feel like that's resolved? And the woman said, yeah, I mean, I divorced him 7 years ago. He's remarried. I'm done. I mean, I made a lot of mistakes. I'm not going to make the mistakes with him. That was the best answer I could have heard. He says, our divorce is not final, and we're going to get married as soon as the divorce is final, but if she wanted me back, I'd go with her. And so I went, oh, I think we got to talk about that. Okay? And so we talked, and I said, I don't think you need premarital counseling from me. I think you need to work through that issue. And I said, I think you need to work through that issue. Because his wife was not remarried. She was not dating anybody. I mean, it was that kind of a thing. He needed to resolve that. So they walked away incredibly angry at me because they wanted me to keep going. He did too. But I wasn't going to do it. They can find somebody else to do it. And they got married. They found somebody else. I think they went to a justice of the peace and they got married. Okay. But I wasn't going to me, it was a lack of integrity on my part if I kept working through that, if he wasn't going to work on that issue. That was a red flag for me. See what I'm saying? So, those are great kind of questions to ask. Okay, so are you ready? So a lot of times, and I think people, even you all, because you could be the kind of people who come to something like this sometimes are people like me, where I want to save the world, so I also want to save whoever the person I'm dating, right? And so you might have to look at that as red flags or at least yellow flags for some of those. The next one, are you willing to be brutally honest about your brokenness? So we're all broken. And are you willing to be brutally honest about whatever your brokenness is? Guys, are you willing, if you have a pornography problem, have you worked through that, and are you on the road to healing if that's your brokenness? Well, women, if you've been sexually abused, are you willing to lay that down in front of your spouse and talk through the pain of that or whatever it might be? Way too many times, and again, I've done hundreds of premarital sessions, thousands of premarital sessions. And I always bring that up, and I always go, what kind of brokenness do you have? And so when the woman sometimes comes, 1 out of 3 of you have had a bad experience like that, of the women. By the way, 1 out of 5 and 1 out of 6 men. So I mean, it's a very dominant issue. But if the woman comes and says in front of her person she's going to marry, well, I did have this experience when I was 11. Or, yeah, I was on a date and I was date raped and she had never told him, then my input is, oh, let's talk about that. So you have to be willing to be brutally honest about your own brokenness, okay? Now, let's go to 5. Also, are you ready for unconditional commitment? The difference between Christians and the non-Christian world is that when I said to Kathy, I will, I do, I needed to be committed forever. And like I said, in that first year, I was reneging on that, okay? And so was she, kind of. So we had to kind of recommit to, we're going to make this thing work. Here's an interesting, more research, than maybe you care, but it's good research. Just recently, this came out, that 78% of marriages that are in trouble, that they would define as in trouble, if they persevere for 5 years, 78% of them say that their marriage is better off. That's huge, massive, crazy. Those people were going down a road toward probably breaking it up or whatever, but they worked on their marriage, they persevered, 78% of them said it's better. That's my story, too, see. So, again, those are things to kind of think about. Now, you can run that through your grid, but you also kind of have to run it through, the grid of even your friends or your family, or you're looking at your mom or dad or things like that. Now we're playing armchair, counselor, with other people too. Yeah. 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 No, absolutely not shoving it down, because that's not working on it. I'm a shover. You're going to meet me in this next session when we talk about conflict, and what I do is I just kind of bury that stuff. I'm avoidant conflict person. Kathy likes conflict. She actually, she didn't want to make conflict, but let's work through this. Let's do this. And I'm like, can I just go crawl in my cave, because I don't want to talk about this. See, and that mine's wrong, hers is better. Okay. And we'll talk. I'm going to teach you guys about conflict here in just in a little bit. So the point that I'm trying to say here is, with this in mind, there are people who go, well, if it doesn't work out, then we'll do something else. That's not going to happen. That people who come to marriage saying, if it doesn't work out, well, we'll have a good couple of years. That doesn't work. In Europe today, in special, like say Belgium, and there's a couple of other places, I can't think of which ones it is right now, but you can get married for 7 years. So you can make a 7-year commitment. So, and it's kind of like you made a 7-year commitment, and then you have to redecide. So I think that's crazy. During my first 7 years, I probably would have jumped. Yeah. Oh, you're just stretching. Yeah. Let's talk. Take a break in a second. We kind of started late, but I still want to keep you on schedule. But so how do you feel? Do you think I was too harsh on any of those? Am I right? Are there, do you know somebody that goes, wow, we all told her not to be dating this guy, and she did anyway, and it's not worked out well? Talk. You guys are quiet today. No, you're just quiet. Huh? No, just talk. No, let's talk about it. Anybody have a story? Yeah.
How would you go about approaching? Because one of my friends, she moved in with her boyfriend last year.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, they're still doing okay.
Uh-huh.
But before she moved in, I was like, oh, maybe you shouldn't. But I think she took it as not like condemnation, but
Yeah.
me kind of judging.
Yeah.
How would you approach that in more of a
Yeah.
gentle way? Like,
Okay.
hey, I don't think you should.
Yeah. Okay. Well, she's your friend.
Yeah.
So if you were my friend, and you are now, but if you were my friend and we were talking and I was like your age or whatever, I was you, and I'm a female, I don't look good as a female. But if I would probably say something like, hey, so no matter whatever you do, you just need to know I love you. And I'm not going anywhere. So we're friends forever, BFFs, whatever, right? However, I think I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't at least tell you that I have these worries about it. And so you say the worries. What I say to parents for kids when they go off the rail, I say, hey, do they know how you feel? Yeah. Do they know what you believe? Sure. Broaden the relationship because she might crash. And if you came off too harsh or too even preachy, if you came off too preachy, then she's going to go, she's not safe. And so I think it's really important that we tell them. That, I mean, the act of love, if you're my friend and I love you in a way like that, then I'm going to say, are you sure about this? She's not going to probably take it like, hey, you're the greatest thing, because again, she's kind of blinded by some of this or whatever it might be. But you start with love, you lead with love, and you end with love. And I'm here for you if that happens, because again, sometimes I've told people your age to tell their friends the stuff that I have a list of 35 things that happen if you cohabitate. I mean, they're not good, okay? And so, would you be willing to read this? In a book that is going to show up here, because I'm going to give you guys some books, but I only have like a very few of those. But in the book, Getting Ready for Marriage, I ask 50 questions to ask. And it's not just about cohabitation. I mean, it's like a couple of questions about it. And those are really cool questions to hand to somebody like that and just go, hey, what do you think about these questions? And the questions are more geared around the things I'm going to talk about in the next thing. How's your relationship with the in-laws? What is your definitely the stuff I just went through. But you're kind of asking questions like that. But also, are you going to cohabitate? Because if you are, the odds are, if you look at you can do this. For people who cohabitate, the rate of divorce is stronger. It just is. And the secular world is trying to cover that up. And maybe the Christian world is too. I don't know. Yeah.
My brain, I was like, I'm gonna forget it. If you kept saying work on your marriage,
Yeah.
what specifically do you mean by that?
Okay,
Like,
so
dates or just time or energy?
yes, all of it. But what I find is if you're in trouble, things aren't really going good, then that's when you get counsel. I mean, that's what a marriage counselor does. So I don't know if Debbie, hi Debbie, this is not Debbie, but I don't know if Debbie's a marriage counselor, but I think she probably is. So then you go to somebody like Debbie because she hears it all the time. And so, you go, you do a date night, you go to a conference, you read a book together once a year, you get in a small group with other people. Let's say that you're in a marriage that's troubling, and the guy, your husband, talking to the women, the husband isn't really tied into spiritual things. How cool, jump into a group of like-minded men. So now he's like, this guy's like a better businessman than me. He likes motorcycles like I do. He hunts, whatever it is. He surfs. And then you go, he's cool. I could be more like him. I can relate, because a lot of men they think that the Christian men are just wimpy, weirdo, wackadoo people. Yeah.
When you do premarital counseling, how many sessions is that usually?
I do 6, but there's not a magic number, but you do,
Weekly, monthly?
as often as they can, but there's things that you're going to see in the next session where, like, for example, budget. A lot of times it's a problem. So I say, next time we meet, I need a budget. I don't even care what the budget looks like, but I just need them to talk about what it costs to be married. And I said, and I won't set up your appointment until the budget is in. Because a lot of times they'll go, we didn't get to the budget, and then they're sitting there and then we can't talk about finances. So I think it's over the process of their engagement, but the earlier in it, the better, because that stuff, I'm trying to work on things that actually, I'm trying to, like, I'll start with, which I'm going to do in the next session, I'm going to start with in-laws, because a lot of times we marry the in-laws and we forget about it. So you go, okay, well, like, your dad's an alcoholic, your mom's this, whatever. So have you guys talked about, you're coming into that family, or they're estranged. For young adults, you guys and older, 27% of young adults are estranged from at least one person in their family. Typically it's dad. Sometimes it's mom. Sometimes it's grandma or uncle or somebody else. Yeah.
You kind of said this where, like, after marriage, they're not really able to work through them. But I have a friend, and she ended up sleeping with her boyfriend before they got married. And basically, his whole family was like, we're not going to support this. Like, you
Yeah.
guys are not getting married until you not divorce. But then they did end up getting married.
Uh,
And then the family was like, okay, you're married, we got you. Like, we're here for you now
Yeah.
that you're married, because
Right.
there's no going back at
Right.
this point. Like, you've already
Yeah.
crossed that line.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, the family is doing the best they can. They didn't think probably this was going to work, or for some reason, so they played the heavy hand. I probably wouldn't go that heavy, but a little bit, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then once they're married, you be the greatest cheerleader. You figure it out. I mean, I saw there's in my life, one of the boys in my life of my daughters, I just don't relate to him as much. We're not as close or whatever. In Maui, I'll do anything I can. I'm going to come up. I need to get to know him better. And so I need to be, he doesn't need to make me his father replacement. He doesn't need to, think I'm the grooviest guy. I think he kind of likes me, but he's not a relational guy. I need to I've said this to Kathy, I need to put energy into to him, just so he knows that I like him, I'm backing him, whatever, because, I probably wouldn't have said this is the wisest, there's maybe somebody else. But I never said it. So what that means is he's not mad at me because he doesn't know how I felt. And actually with Becca, I gave her some input, and then I just said, well, you're going to have to think through this and this and this. She acknowledges that with me now, certain things, but I never said he's a jerk and we, go like this. I cheered him on. Now I am their greatest marriage cheerleader. That's my job, and Kathy's too. Well, codependence is we could do. Have you guys had anything on codependence while you've been here? Okay, codependence is man, that's like a thing I love talking about. Yeah, you're right. She's totally codependent then. Yeah. 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 So codependency, usually the other person has an issue and the codependent is coming alongside. I'll give you an illustration. My mom was a codependent to my dad. So my dad's an alcoholic. My mom's like, here's a beer, because he was better off when he had a beer in his hand, in his body than he did when he wasn't, because he was grumpy or whatever. So my dad at 68 years old, I took him to an alcohol rehab, and he got sober. I mean, amazing, 68. You don't see that with like old guys. So he got sober. My mom went down because her whole deal was trying to keep my dad healthy and happy and keep him away from some of the stuff in the family because, he would be a goofy person at that. So mom's codependency, you almost have to look at that as kind of a sickness too. And she needed help for that. So that's why strong, if you're married to an alcoholic or there's an alcoholic thing, that's why I believe in Al-Anon and, all those kind of things, because you learn how to not be a codependent. Yeah. Well, I don't want to, it's 11, so let's take about an 8-minute break because I started so late. Now I can see that the video's on. I hadn't even looked at that. I think Nate came in and set it all up, didn't he? I didn't even see. I saw him come in, and then he must have set that up. So let's take a little bit of a break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about more of these kind of specifics. Okay? Did you guys clap after everything? I don't think they've ever done that at Anchor House before. Are you guys clapper? Everybody finishes and then they clap? That cracks me up.